it's going to hell down here in Texas.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Big Bad Bob with you, otherwise known as just Rob Clark. This is the Lone Gunman Podcast, and this is episode number 233. That's right. Oh, the Masonic symbolism. We're going to get into all kinds of fun shit today. All kinds of good stuff from Bringuier and Garrison, William Gaudet, Jack Ruby, Lee Oswald, random witnesses, all kinds of good stuff, folks. So stick with me here. And make sure you're following along on TikTok and Twitter at the Lone Gunman 7, and also on YouTube, the Lone Gunman Podcast channel. Make sure you like and subscribe, and feel free to review the podcast. And make sure it's a 5-star one, hook your boy up. And wherever you listen to the show, mucho apreciado. That is Spanish for much appreciated, in case you did not know. And also, we're going to hear from the Lone Gunman Podcast new sponsor right about now. Big Bad Bob here with you for Silk City Hot Sauces. Why Silk City? Because this hot sauce comes to you directly from Paterson, New Jersey, also known as Silk City. These hot sauces are 100% natural, gluten-free, vegan, contain no chemicals, fillers, dyes, or junk. Everything is packed into recyclable glass containers because glass doesn't leach weird flavors into the product. All other hot sauces are sourced in small batches from locally bought fresh peppers. It's all about the pepper, people. I'm telling you. Your boy, Big Bad Bob, loves his food like he loves his women. Hot and spicy, but not so hot you can't eat them. So, if you love yourself some sauce and you're tired of trying to transform your bland meat into something edible, with the tip of a jar, you will transform your life forever. Head over to silkcityhotsauce.com, place an order, and upon checkout, enter the code GUNMAN, that's GUNMAN, for 20% off of your entire order. You won't regret it. Thank me later. Peace. That's right. That's silkcityhotsauce.com. Enter the code GUNMAN at checkout for 20% off your entire order. If you'd like to support the show, that's how you do it, folks. Buy some goddamn hot sauce. You won't regret it. Although your asshole might. All right, let's get right into the show. Here we go, folks. First up, we have a CIA document from February 6, 1967, concerning it's from the Director, Domestic Contact Service to the Chief of New Orleans office concerning Carlos Bringuier and his Casa Cuba store at 111 Decatur Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. In response to a telephone call at the office, during the afternoon of February the 1st, 1967, from subject requesting an interview. Hunter Leak of this office met with him at his place of business, the clothing and notions store, in the morning of February 2nd. The attached document, forwarded for retention, was submitted by a subject as his outline of a suggested plan to counteract the communist propaganda, which, subject states, is being widely circulated throughout Latin America to the effect that Lee Harvey Oswald was only a pawn in a plot by U.S. far-right elements to assassinate President Kennedy. Now, it's funny, he wants to say that, yet he's also doing the tour with General Walker and uh, was it Billy Joe Hargis or Bobby Joe Hargis? Extreme far white. Well, they are white. Extreme far right elements who are suspected by some to be behind the assassination of President Kennedy. Subject says that he gets this information mainly from the many Latin American crew members of the merchant ships and Latin American tourists whom he serves in his store. That the U.S. is losing this propaganda war, which is causing serious and growing damage to the image of the U.S., President Johnson, CIA, the Pentagon, and the FBI throughout Latin America. He believes that any overtly sponsored effort of the port of the U.S. government or conducted by North Americans would be ineffective, and that any such effort should be carried out by Latin American newsmen, preferably in Spanish and Portuguese in local idioms and accents, under the covert tutelage and supervision of the appropriate U.S. government agencies. So what he's saying here is that they should be doing their own kind of anti-propaganda, anti-communist propaganda, and he wants the CIA to sponsor it and use Latin American people and their Latin American accents. Okay. Source also said that the New Orleans DA, Jim Garrison, is conducting his own investigation of Oswald's role in President Kennedy's assassination. At the probable instigation of one Sam DePino, whose business card the subject has and which shows him to be a television newsman connected to the local ABC station, WVUE Channel 12, and with Screen Gems Broadcasting of Louisiana, Inc. In this connection, source said that he was interviewed by two men from the DA's office, whom he was unable to identify, and that a friend of his by the name of Quiroga, that would be Quiroga, had been subpoenaed and personally interrogated by Garrison. We believe that there is some truth in the allegation of the Garrison investigation, and that the matter is under a discreet and sensitive investigation by the FBI. Let me repeat that sentence for you people. We, the CIA, believe that there is some truth in the allegation of the Garrison investigation, and that the matter is under a discreet and sensitive investigation by the FBI. Yeah, that part. All right. Next up, we have a FBI document dated April the 1st, April Fool's Day, 1964. From the special agent in charge of New York to J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI. On March 26, 64, there was somebody, NY3948C, reported that he had a conversation with V.T. Lee on 3/20/64, in which Lee mentioned to the informant that he had turned over all correspondence regarding the desire of Lee Harvey Oswald to establish a chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in Dallas to the FBI. The informant indicated that Lee also related that statements concerning the assassination of President Kennedy by individuals previously active in the FPCC declare that the president was actually assassinated by Dallas police officer Tippit. Also, that 1 week before the assassination, Patrolman Tippit, the head of the John Birch Society in Dallas, and an unnamed third party suggested by these FPCC individuals as highly as possibly being Oswald were together in Jack Ruby's nightclub. Lee also stated that while Oswald was an FPCC advocate, he had also joined a number of anti-Castro movements and was therefore in position to know everything that was going on both sides of the issues involved. Now, I don't know where old VT Lee is getting his information about Kennedy actually being assassinated by Tippit, but all righty then. In the immortal words of Jim Carrey. All right. Next up, an FBI report furnished to Special Agent James O'Neill and James Wallace from a confidential informant. On the evening of January the 16th, 1964, a dinner sponsored by Orrin Fenton Petito was held at Donat's Restaurant, Haynes Road, St. Petersburg, Florida. The dinner meeting was informal, public in nature, and approximately 41 persons were in attendance. The source has identified Petito as a member of the National States Rights Party in the spring of 1963, at which time Petito resigned while holding the office of National Organizer. Since that time, Petito has held his own meetings under various titles, all of which are non-existent organizations. He is not known to have any national affiliation at the present time, although he is in contact with various leaders of right-wing groups in the United States. Excuse me. In the course of his speech of some 3 hours following the dinner, Petito touched on the association between Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. Petito identified Ruby, real name Rubenstein, as a Communist Party member since 1929, and through this connection linked him to Oswald. He identified Oswald as a communist through his association with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. According to Petito, only 2 organizations knew the route of the parade in Dallas on November 22nd for any period of time prior to the parade, and these 2 were the United States Secret Service and the Dallas Police Department. Now, Ruby had insinuated himself with the police department circle, obtained the route, and arranged with Oswald to take a job at the state school building along the route to carry out the assassination. Tito said the Surgeon General's report on the assassination stated that the first bullet entered the president's throat below the Adam's apple, clearly showing that at least two persons were involved, with the first shot being fired from the bridge across the parkway in front of the car. To further substantiate this, Petito said there was a bullet hole in the windshield of the president's car. Of course, we've all heard that before, But is it just a crack, or was there a hole? I mean, I know at some point somebody said that they could stick their pencil through the hole after observing this at Parkland Hospital. And of course, there is some windshield fuckery, as we like to call it around here. I believe Douglas Weldon has done the most extensive research into the windshield of the president's limousine. And there was definitely some fuckery going on there. Believe me, people. All right, next up, we've always speculated how great it would be, we have a lot of the CIA files, a lot of the FBI files. some Secret Service documents, not all of them, since they learned a lot of them. But we always speculated how nice it would be to get the INS documents pertaining to Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, we have an FBI file here, just a memorandum to file from Agent Paul Wallach, December 3rd, 1975, a telephone conversation with Wendell Roach. Following up on yesterday's initial phone contact, I spoke with Roach this afternoon for about 20 minutes. He again was cooperative and agreed to come to D.C. as long as it was cleared with his superiors. Roach explained that in 1963, he was in charge of the INS New Orleans Border Patrol Station. Station Senior, which was not in the Customs House building. The station reported directly to the New Orleans District Office, which at that time was run by Edward Cupp. Bob Brewer was then in charge of the BR section in the regional INS office in Richmond, Virginia. According to Roach, INS's role is to determine who is an alien and prevent unauthorized border crossings. However, frequent additional requirements were levied upon INS, such as supplementing federal marshals. In the incident area, INS New Orleans was charged with the responsibility of surveilling various Cuban groups in New Orleans. Although Roach cannot specifically recall who initiated the requirement, he assumes it came through Justice and stated that Cupp should be clearer on the details. Included in this surveillance was a group of nuts. No, you dirty-minded people, not those kind of nuts. Crazy people, like David Ferry. Roach knew the details on Ferry, i.e. his dismissal from Eastern Airlines, homosexual with perverse tendencies, nuttier than a fruitcake, in quotes, etc. He stated that Ferry's office on a side street between St. Charles and Camp, we'll have a street map for him, was under surveillance. Although he never surveilled it, another inspector drove him past it and identified it to him that Lee Harvey Oswald was identified by INS as an American when he first appeared on the New Orleans street scene. He does not recall the circumstances surrounding this identification. Was seen going into the offices of Ferry's group, and Oswald was known to be one of the men in the group. Roach was aware that Ferry's group was anti-Castro, that Ferry had a plane at the airport, and that it was believed that Ferry was going to take his brigade, which was being trained by a 6-foot ex-Marine at Lake Pontchartrain, to Cuba. He further stated that Ferry liked young men and was known to give these guys all sorts of pills at the training camp and take movies of them. Wow. Okay. Roach stressed that the New Orleans Police Department, specifically the Intelligence Division, and the East Metairie Sheriff's Office had reports on Ferry's nutty group. He added that Garrison had something. I read his reports in the newspaper and they were correct. He received good intelligence information, whether he was using it for politics or not. Roach also noted that Garrison was all eyes and ears in the French Quarter, and that he had heard Ferry was running when he was killed. Roach did not know, 1, whether Oswald ever visited the training camp, 2, about any organized crime tie-ins, 3, about Oswald being arrested for getting into a fight, 4, about Oswald's alleged anti-Cuban politics, 5, whether Oswald had any contacts with other law enforcement and or intelligence agencies, 6, of a restaurant called Pedro's, 7, specific dates for any facts described herein. Roach himself had seen Oswald on only one occasion, when Oswald was handing out handbills at a point not too far from Jackson Square, also not too far from the trademark. The most interesting occurrence was touched on by Roach. He related that Ron Smith happened to receive a call from the New Orleans Police Department, which at that time had Oswald in custody. Apparently, Oswald would only speak Russian, and the New Orleans PD deducted that he was Russian. Smith went to the NOPD, and Roach believes that he identified Oswald as an American citizen. And after calling his bluff, Oswald began to speak in English. So we got Mr. Oswald, the funny guy over here, fooling the police and just speaking Russian. And they're thinking they caught themselves a real live commie Russian. No. I'm really American. I got you guys. I speak English. Uh, yeah. So even Oswald had a sense of humor, folks. Roach does not know if Smith filed a report. He did state that he talked to Smith about it 2 weeks ago, adding that he had no objection to my telling Smith that he referred me to him. We generally discussed INS's record keeping. Apparently, almost all of Roach's reports to CUP were oral, thankfully, and not anal. He does not believe that any reports were written on the aforementioned points, with the exception of the levying of requirements on an INS. Roach had limited, if any, contact with the Breeze or any other FBI or CIA agent. I knew him. He also told me that INS did not have informants in these groups. No idea of anyone that had. I asked Roach who else besides Cup Smith, and he was likely to have known about Oswald. I assume we can get INS records. He suggested Russell Bruce. INS Local Investigations Office would have checked out Cubans in Dallas. Let's get their agents lists too. Interesting. Next up, some documents about somebody that I've had a lot, not a lot, but some requests to cover here on the show. A CIA asset by the name of William George Gaudet, or Gaudet, however you want to say it. So, FBI document dated November 27th, 1963. William George Gaudet telephonically contacted this agent who advised that he had heard Jack Ruby from Dallas had purchased paintings from one Lorenzo Borenstein, who has an art gallery somewhere in the 500 block of Royal Street. Gaudet also stated that he did not know what dates Ruby bought these paintings. And that's about it for this FBI document taken by Special Agent John Miller in New Orleans on November 27, 63. Again. So, why is this guy interesting? Well, I'll tell you. On September 17th, 1963, Oswald visited the Mexican consulate in New Orleans, where he was issued a 15-day tourist card, number 24085. The man whose tourist card was apparently issued directly before Oswald's was William George Gaudet, who told the FBI on 11/27 that he was a former employee of the CIA. Comparing information garnered from Oswald's and Gaudet's tourist card applications, two things are possibly significant. First, all of the 19 people who appeared at the consulate on September 17th had their names listed in BC 75 in the order of first name, middle, last name, except for Oswald and Gaudet. The former's name was mistakenly inverted Harvey Oswald Lee, and the latter's is listed as Gaudet William George. This is probably innocent, as Oswald's inversion was plausibly explained by the bunching together of Harvey Oswald on his application, thus suggesting Lee was his last name. As Gaudet probably filled out his application, Gaudet William George, and he appeared before Oswald, this might have influenced the consulate employee to think Oswald's name was an inversion as well. Researchers are free to come up with other explanations from this coincidence. Another minor point is that of the 19 people appearing on 9/17, only Gaudet, Oswald, and one other person, Arthur C. Mason, a 6-month tourist card, listed tourist as the purpose of their trip. I guess the others were business or vacation. Curiously enough, Gaudet's name appears in the hearings and exhibits on a completely different matter. Commission Document 2880, an FBI report, relates that William George Gaudet telephoned the New Orleans FBI regarding Jack Ruby buying paintings from Lorenzo Bornstein in New Orleans. So yeah, we got that one. This one is interesting. A little bit more on Gaudet. Okay. And this comes from an interview of Mr. Gaudet, or Gaudet. I'll say it both ways. Get off my ass. By Bud Finsterwald in 1975. He writes that Gaudet is now 67 years of age and in poor health, semi-retired, writes for local newspaper. During World War II, Gaudet worked as a secret agent in Latin America for Nelson Rockefeller, coordinator of Latin American affairs under FDR. He switched over to the CIA in 1947 and worked for them until 1969. During this time, he published Latin American Newsletter and Latin American Report, which he claims were 100% commercial ventures and not CIA fronts. Okay, George. However, he traveled constantly in Latin America and combined his commercial work with his CIA assignments. The latter, according to him, were basically uncompensated. Okay, George. Some expenses were paid up for the CIA and done for patriotic purposes. There were 3 others in the New Orleans area who did likewise. Was one of them Clay Shaw there, George? Gaudet is a right-winger, generally disliked JFK. He kept his CIA activities very secret, not even telling his wife. He only told the FBI in 1963. He never told anyone else. Latin American Newsletter cost $15 a week. God damn, that's highway robbery in the 60s. Jesus. But the CIA and the KGB had an excess of 20 subscriptions. Good Lord. Which means that each of them subsidized Gaudet to the tune of more than $15,000 annually, which wasn't too bad in the 60s. So he was compensated in other ways, even if not directly. You know what I'm saying? As to the JFK slaying, he believes the Warren Report is a fairy tale, which shall become completely unglued very soon. He believes that anti-Castro forces were involved and personally believes that they had a right to hate JFK. He thinks the plot was hatched soon after the Bay of Pigs and came to fruition in 1963. As to having the Mexican travel permit serially next to Oswald's, Gaudet explains that it was a complete coincidence and that he never met Oswald. He backs and yeah, he backs and fills on whether he flew to Merida or Mexico City. What is of more interest is the fact that he was interviewed 3 times by FBI about it. Before telling them anything, he checks with Bill, the CIA station chief in New Orleans, who in turn checks with Langley, and it is decided that Gaudet should answer questions regarding the Mexican trip, but nothing more. And FBI promises to keep Gaudet's name to itself and save his cover. Apparently, they did so until 1972, when his name was inadvertently declassified. Gaudet says the FBI report about his having reported on Ruby's buying paintings from Bornstein is a complete fabrication. He didn't know either Bornstein or Ruby, and he wouldn't volunteer the time of day to the FBI. Well, that's goddamn odd, right? Why would somebody telephone a tip to the FBI about some random Jack Ruby buying a painting in New Orleans once? That's weird. Gaudet says he never met Oswald and that he only observed him on occasion. In any event, he describes him as a miserable little creature who would do anything for money. Like, believes he was being financed by someone. Most seriously doubts if he could have pulled off the rifle fire in Dealey Plaza, as LHO was terribly nervous and disorganized. So for somebody who doesn't know jack shit about Oswald, he sure sounds like he knows a lot about Oswald. You know what I'm saying? Believes LHO worked both sides of the Cuban street. In quotes, doesn't really admit to knowing what he was up to. Rumored to have an office in a building immediately across the street from the trademark. He knew that LHO went to Mexico by bus. Gaudet described the CIA setup in New Orleans in detail. Large offices with approximately redacted people, similar to CIA setup in all ports, unmarked office, unlisted phones. New Orleans office headed by Bill, in quotes, a lawyer, prominent family, debutante daughter. Since learned that Bill is redacted and office is redacted. CIA New Orleans closed circuit. The Langley CIA only paid Gaudet's special travel expenses when their tasks couldn't be done on his regular trips. Gaudet was once flown to Langley to brief CIA on Latin American affairs. Laughs when he thinks of Rockefeller as head of a commission to study either the CIA or Dallas. Ferry knew LHO and Shaw, but Shaw wasn't CIA and had nothing to do with Dallas. Okay. Thinks E. Howard Hunt knows more about Dallas than any other person he can think of. Hunt was God to the Cubans, and he is certain that the CIA sent Hunt out immediately after Dallas to see what he could find out about a, quote, Cuban connection. Gaudet knows of LHO's cousin, Marilyn Mirette, in an intelligence connection capacity. Says that Sergio Arcacha Smith should be cross-examined if alive and subpoenaable. On June 15, 1978, Mr. Gaudet testified to this committee, the SCA, that his last contact with the CIA was during the year 1969, though he has never formally terminated his relationship with the CIA. We just kind of stopped calling each other, just kind of fell off, grew apart, basically. Mr. Gaudet also testified concerning Special Agent Miller's November 27 report, which recorded Gaudet's agency affiliation. Gaudet stated he revealed his CIA employment after I checked with the CIA and was supposed to have been super classified and was never to be released. And it was under the circumstances the CIA gave me authority to tell the FBI. Gaudet added that the head of the CIA in New Orleans was with me when I made it, the disclosure. Gaudet testified that his travels to Merida, Mexico on September 19th and into Central and South America was not an intelligence-related activity. However, he did state, I won't make a blanket statement. I did not. I just don't recall. The select committee questioned Mr. Gaudet regarding his knowledge of Lee Harvey Oswald. Gaudet testified that prior to the assassination, he did not know Oswald, but had observed him across from his office at the International Trade Mart in New Orleans, passing out fair play for Cuba pamphlets. I remember specifically that Lila Pinson, who worked for me, wanted me to talk to him and do a story on him. The man so impressed me that I was not interested in doing a story, and since I was, the man so unimpressed me that I was not interested in doing a story, and since I was the boss, I said no. Gaudet further stated that he had observed Oswald in conversation with Guy Bannister. I saw him, Bannister, in deep conversation with Lee Harvey Oswald on Camp Street, right by the post office box. They were leaning over and talking, and it was an earnest conversation. What it was about, I don't know. Gaudet further testified that Oswald and Bannister appeared to be acquainted with each other and that Bannister was requesting Oswald to do something for him. Gaudet's only other knowledge of Oswald came through a friend named Ed Butler, who had conducted an interview for radio with Oswald, to which Gaudet remembered listening to. So, there's our adventures in William Gaudet land, folks. For somebody who doesn't know a lot, he sure knows a lot. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Here's a fun one. From January 28, 1964, CIA document. Informant advised that he had been in contact with one Manuel Noriega, communications man of the DFS in Mexico City. Noriega advised that one Gloria Carriago, a relative of Amalia Castilla Ledon, Sub-Secretary of Public Education, Mexico City, had crossed the border at Laredo, Texas in late November of 1963, and while talking to an American immigration officer, was shown a photograph of the subject, Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. Both these individuals in the same photograph. The photo was supposedly taken in October of 63, according to the third-hand information. Gloria Carriaga is an employee of the Commercial Transports of Mexico City, phone number 30-17-87. Interesting. Next up, we have a document about Joe Tonahill, who was Ruby's trial lawyer. Now, Joe Tonahill was inducted into the Trial Lawyer Hall of Fame in 2018. And here's a quick 2-minute induction ceremony for Joe Tonahill, Jack Ruby's lawyer. You're going to dig this. Here it is.
Joe Tonahill was born in 1914. He attended the University of Texas before becoming a lawyer in Jasper, Texas. A former wrestler, Tonahill was 6 feet 4 and weighed over 300 pounds. Joe Tonahill was a larger-than-life legal giant who, coming from humble beginnings, made it his life's work to be a people's lawyer, while earning international acclaim along the way. In 1935, Tonahill enrolled at the University of Texas to study law, but graduated in 1941 from the American University College of Law. During World War II, Tonahill served in the Navy. After the war, he moved to Jasper to start a law practice with Joe Fisher. He practiced law in Jasper for more than half a century, but he also tried cases all across the country, including his highly publicized presence on the Jack Ruby defense team, when in November 1963 he was employed by Jack Ruby as his attorney and worked with Melvin Belli on defending him against the charge of murdering Lee Harvey Oswald. Tonahill distinguished himself as a co-founder of the American Trial Lawyers Association and went on to co-found the Texas Trial Lawyers Association, where he served as president, as well as the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, International Academy of Trial Lawyers, and the International Society of Barristers. He was also a pioneer in worker protection, product liability, juror reform, and other areas. Joe's son, Joe Tonahill Jr., said of his father, "He worked hard on his cases and seemed to take them very personally. He lived the law and breathed it."
What a lovely, lovely induction ceremony for Mr. Joe Tonahill. He was quoted as saying, "I always hated to see my cases end because the experience was so exhilarating." All right. So, this is an FBI document from the Las Vegas office to the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, and Dallas, dated March 1767. This date, Howard Goodwin, Associate Director of Sales at the Sahara Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, and former special agent of the FBI, advised the American Trial Lawyers Association is presently conducting a seminar at the Sahara. Goodwin stated that in connection with this seminar that Joe Tonahill of Jasper, Texas, and a co-counsel in the Jack Ruby case will hold a press conference at 11 a.m. on March the 18th at the Sahara Hotel. Network television coverage has been arranged for this press conference in addition to coverage by national press representatives. At this conference, Tonahill allegedly plans to disclose 3 items bearing on the death of Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. Item 1, that Oswald died as a result of shock brought on by the improper administration of medications in the hospital in Dallas, Texas. And item 2, the cancer from which Jack Ruby died was so widespread that it had to have been artificially introduced into his body. The third item to be disclosed by Joe Tonahill is not known to Goodwin yet. The above is submitted to the Bureau in Dallas for information only. So, apparently, Tonahill had information that the gunshot didn't kill Oswald. It was improper administration of medications in the hospital is what killed him. See, it wasn't Jack Ruby. And that the cancer from which Jack Ruby died was so widespread that it had to have been artificially introduced into his body. Just had to be. Had to be. According to the official record, Jack Ruby killed by a, what is it called? An embolism due to lung cancer. Dallas Deputy Sheriff Al Maddox claimed that Ruby told me, he said, well, they injected me for a cold. He said it was cancer cells. That's what he told me. Ruby did. I said, you don't believe that bullshit. He said, I damn sure do. One day when I started to leave, Ruby shook hands with me, and I could feel a piece of paper in his palm. There was a note in which Ruby claimed that he was part of a conspiracy and that his role was to silence Oswald. Not long before Ruby died, according to an article in the London Sunday Times, told psychiatrist Werner Hutter that the assassination was an act of overthrowing the government and that he knew who had President Kennedy killed. He added, "I am doomed. I do not want to die. And I am not insane. I was framed to kill Oswald." Now, I've also read and tried to find where I found it, but it's very difficult to find. But that Ruby actually had cancer, uh, I believe in the early 60s, and he knew it. And of course, they treated him for it and everything else. But he knew he was not long for this world. Um, or maybe he didn't. I don't know how they viewed cancer back in the early 60s. Did they view it as a death sentence? Did they view it as something that was treatable? Did they say, "Ah, man, you got cancer now. Here, take these vitamins and these pills, and it'll keep you alive as long as we possibly can. But eventually, it's going to get you. You might have a couple years." And maybe that's why Ruby was so hell bent on working out every day, swimming at the Y, taking all these vitamins and pills to try to, keep him going. Maybe that was because of his cancer diagnosis. But to say that, he was injected with a rapid form of cancer is ridiculous. He always had the cancer in him. He just finally got him in 1967, probably along with his, stress and anxiety and being in prison for 4 years. Um, Probably wasn't very helpful to him because he probably didn't get the proper medical care could have that he could have gotten had he not been incarcerated. That is a often heard myth. Let's see here. George Feraldo. He is a former manager of the Key West airport, reported seeing Oswald and Ruby in the Key West terminal on their way to Cuba with Fair Play for Cuba Group, a former contract agent for the U.S. Information Agency, serial audio and photo reconnaissance expert. Key West. So, what this guy is saying is Miami by Airtel, dated 8/25/76, submitted an LHM reporting results of interview with George Feraldo at Key West, Florida. Feraldo advised that in the late summer of 62 or early 63, a group of persons known as Fair Play for Cuba assembled at the Key West airport while awaiting the arrival of a Cuban transport aircraft. Feraldo claims that Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald were in this group. Feraldo also claims and took both still photographs and movie film of this group. He alleges he mailed the movie film to Ralph Rennick, a news reporter in Miami for whom he worked as a stringer, and he mailed the still film in a brown envelope to the FBI headquarters. He stated he included a note in the envelope which stated only "Fair Play for Cuba. Miami is continuing investigation." This advises Miami and Dallas of results of indices search. So that would be interesting if we had photos and movies of Oswald and Ruby together that mysteriously disappeared. Shocker. All right, next up, some more FBI-ness. In view of the extensive inquiry into the Revel Hosty controversy during the assassination investigation, it is not believed further comment warranted, as the facts of this matter are well known to the Bureau. From the comments on page 17 and 21 concerning Oswald being known to the FBI, It is likely readers will again question why the Dallas PD was not alerted to Oswald's presence in Dallas. The Bureau is well aware that the criteria for alerting local police agencies to entertain individuals did not require such notification at the time of the assassination. On page 46, Exhibit 11, there's a photograph reflecting officers examining an area for bullet fragments, under which it states in part, an FBI agent, Sheriff Bill Decker, and a Dallas police officer inspect the area for bullet fragments. It comments on page 46 that a bystander, James Tay, claimed to have been cut on the cheek by a ricochet from a bullet which struck a curb, and that a visible mark was left on the curb, but was almost entirely ignored by the FBI until months later. Dallas teletype to Bureau in New Orleans dated 12/15/67 pointed out to the Bureau that Deputy Sheriff Buddy Walters, Dallas County Sheriff's Office, deceased, had reportedly stated he was the individual appearing in the photograph rather than Sheriff Decker. Dallas Airtel to Bureau dated 12/19/67 pointed out that efforts to identify the alleged, quote, federal agent in such photograph were negative. On page 61, Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry states that about 10 months after the assassination, Dallas Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig discussed the shooting with Mr. and Mrs. Arnold Rowland, and that Arnold Rowland indicated he had looked up at the Texas School Book Depository window and noticed two men standing together in the window. One man was holding a rifle, standing with the other man a few feet back from the corner on the 6th floor. Curry states that Mr. and Mrs. Rowland were then referred to the FBI, who interviewed them, but no statement about the second man or mention of an accomplice appeared in the FBI reports. The reports of Special Agent Robert Jimberling, dated November 30th, 63, reflect the interviews with Arnold Rowland and also set forth background investigation concerning Rowland. Next up, December 6, 63, Mrs. Tony Henderson, Prairie Creek, Dallas, Texas, furnished the following information. On November 22nd, 1963, at approximately 12:15 p.m., he was standing on the east side of Elm Street, just north of Houston Street, awaiting the passing of the presidential motorcade. It said shortly after she arrived, and just prior to the arrival of the motorcade, she recalls an ambulance arriving and departing the area to pick up an individual whom she understood had had an epileptic fit. Mrs. Henderson said after the ambulance departed the area, he heard a woman in the Dallas County Records building located in the southwest corner of Elm and Houston yell, "Yeah, Woodman," which is at Dallas High School. And she looked in the direction from which the yell emanated. She said she thereafter swung around and looked in the building in which she works. The building located on the southeast corner of Elm and Houston, and bent around to the Texas School Book Depository building. She said she observed numerous people on various floors looking out of the windows of the Texas School Book Depository, and recalls she saw two men on one of the upper floors of the building. She said she recalls one of the men had on a white shirt and one had on a dark shirt. She said only she observed these men from the waist up and does not know what their other attire consisted of. She said these men were standing back from the window, and she got the impression that they were working and yet looking out the window. Instead, she saw these men before the motorcade reached Houston and Elm, but doesn't have any idea how long it was prior to the motorcade arriving at that location. She said she believed the person in the white shirt had dark hair and was possibly a Mexican, but could have been a Negro, as he appeared to be dark complexioned, and said she couldn't describe the other person other than the fact that he was taller or appeared taller than the aforementioned individual. Now, just an aside here, folks, and this is just me spitballing. Of course, in previous shows and through various other testimony and evidence and all of that jazz, I think we've established that Mr. Bonnie Ray Williams, we know, was up on the sixth floor of the school book depository. I believe he qualifies as a light-skinned Negro and could possibly appear as a Mexican or Latino from, a fair distance away. You know, we know that by his own admission, Bonnie Ray was up on the sixth floor, possibly as late as 12:15, 12:25, which is when this woman and the Rowlands say that they saw two men up there in the window. Now, from photos of Bonnie Ray being arrested and stuffed unceremoniously in the back of the cop car, the arrest of the floor crew, we see that Bonnie Ray Williams has on a dark shirt. And we know that Oswald was likely wearing a white t-shirt that day, which is what several people said that they saw him working in. He probably had on a button-up shirt, but probably took it off uh, while he was working. So he was just in a white t-shirt, and he had dark hair. So my assumption is that possibly Henderson got these two individuals' shirts mixed up, and actually the Negro had on the dark colored shirt, and the white dark haired man had on the white t-shirt, which could give us uh, Bonnie Ray being up on the sixth floor with Oswald or an Oswald or some other random white dude that looked like Oswald, who may have told him, look, man, I'm going to kill the president when he goes by here. Your best bet would be to get the fuck out of here. If you say anything, I'll fucking kill you. I know who you are. I know where your family lives. I will fucking kill you. And then Williams hightails it down the floor, tells these other two cats what he just saw. And then it goes down and they get scared shitless and come up with some cockamamie ass story. I'm just saying, it's not out of the realm of possibility, folks. Just saying. Possibly could happen. Bear it in mind. Next up, on the HSCA, March 15th, 1978, from an interview with Joseph Goulden. Robert Jensman interviewed Joseph Goulden at his home concerning an article which Goulden wrote in the Philadelphia Inquirer on December the 8th, 1963, alleging that the FBI had tried to recruit Lee Harvey Oswald as an informant in 1963. Goulden stated that he obtained the story from two sources: Dallas Deputy Sheriff Alan Sweat, now deceased, and an individual he declined to identify. He did state that Alonzo Lonnie Hunkins was not the source. Goulden stated that he relied on the word of his sources and never obtained any other evidence substantiating the allegation. He believes that his sources relied in part on the fact that the FBI agent James P. Hostie's telephone number was found in Oswald's notebook, and possibly on the fact that an informant number was found among Oswald's possessions after his arrest on November 22nd, 1963. Goulden stated that his memory on these matters is unclear. That's interesting. Next up, we have a Secret Service memo. Random from November the 25th, 1963. Information obtained at the Dallas office. During the interview of the subject's wife, that would be Marina, she advised that the FBI had contacted her about the location of her husband 10 days prior to the assassination, and she had told them that her husband worked in the building from which the president had been killed. She also stated that she had been interviewed in October and gave the same basic information to the FBI. While I was at the police station, I engaged an FBI agent in conversation and found out that he was on the subversive desk. He stated that Oswald had contacted 2 known subversive agents about 15 days before the shooting, but the entire information was top secret, and he could not tell us any more, but he felt sure that the file would be turned over to our chief. The wife also advised that she had seen the rifle that was used in the shooting at her home about 3 weeks before the shooting. She advised that she was a Castro supporter and communist, and from the interview, it felt like she is still a hardcore communist. He stated that he had never mentioned killing the president, but would not mention anything about shooting Connolly. He stated that she did not know the man that killed her husband. It was felt by the interview that she was not telling the truth and still believes firmly in communism. William H. Patterson, Special Agent. So, there you have it, folks. Another exciting episode of the Lone Gunman Podcast. Make sure you follow along on TikTok and Twitter at the Lone Gunman 7. On YouTube, the Lone Gunman Podcast channel. That's right. And make sure to order some goddamn hot sauce from Silk City, baby. Head over to silkcityhotsauce.com. Place an order. Enter the code GUNMAN. That's GUNMAN. In the code upon checkout for 20% off your entire order. And tell them your boy, Big Bad Bobby, sent you. You won't regret it, but your asshole might. And now, another Lone Gunman exclusive of the new Shepherd of Fire. It's Shepherd of fucking Fire. Shepherd of Fire. New hit song, Conspiracy. Take it away, Raj.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Wayside, this is Situation Room. I read from the AP bulletin. Kennedy apparently shot in head. He fell face down in back seat of his car. Blood was on his head. Mrs. Kennedy cried, "Oh no!" And
don't believe all what they tell you. The FBI or the CIA. The media and the lies that they tell you. The big event that killed JFK. Yeah, they knew him all well. Oh, yeah. Oh, well. Oh,
Look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest?
I said, whoever threw that paper, your mom's a hoe.
At this moment, he knew he fucked up.
He needs some milk. Fuck that shit, I'm out.